Ever imagine yourself like totally crushing it in a coding interview, feeling like an absolute rock star, only to get hit with a big fat rejection?
It happens more than you'd think, especially to those used to the fast-paced world of competitive coding.
And that's what we're diving into today, this whole fascinating world of coding where, acing those competitions doesn't necessarily translate to like real world success.
Right.
We're dissecting a blog post from Algo Academy, it's called. We weren't always these magnificent coders. A journey from bloopers to brilliance.
Catchy title.
And let me tell you, it is a wild ride, this post.
It really highlights the difference in mindset, and the skills between competitive coding and what it takes to actually thrive as a software developer, like out in the real world.
Absolutely, yeah. They share this story, this really interesting story about a guy named Andre. He's like basically a competitive coding legend. You'd think someone racking up gold medals, like nothing would be a shoe-in for, any tech job, right?
You think so, yeah. Makes sense.
But that's not how it goes down for Andre. This guy walks into a job interview feeling super confident, thinking, he's practically got the job in the bag. But then, rejection.
Oof, that's rough.
And to make matters worse, they don't even give him a reason why.
Brutal. It's a crushing experience, though, and one that a lot of programmers, they face this when they're transitioning from that competition mindset to, like, the realities of, working in the field.
Before we unpack Andre's epic interview fail, let's set the stage a little bit for those maybe who aren't familiar with the competitive coding scene. What's the name of the game in that world?
Speed, pure and simple. It's like a drag race where the goal is just to cross that finish line first, and how you get there, well, that's,
Not always pretty.
Yeah, not always pretty. You're optimizing for the absolute fastest solution, which often comes at the expense of things like code readability or maintainability, which, as you can imagine, are crucial in professional settings.
Right. So it's kind of like building a rocket-powered go-kart that can win a short race versus building a car you can rely on for the long haul, one that someone else could drive and understand.
That's a great analogy. Both, they require some serious engineering skills, but the goals and the end results are just vastly different. One prioritizes speed above all else, while the other has to consider a whole bunch of factors like safety, reliability, and of course, maintainability.
Yeah, totally. And that brings us back to Andre, our coding champ, who's about to get a little bit of a harsh dose of reality. He's so used to this win at all costs mentality that he kind of carries that right into the job interview.
Makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. He breezes through those technical challenges, falls back on those memorized solutions, his competition experience. He's thinking, I've got this.
Piece of cake.
Exactly.
But there's a big piece missing, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. A big piece. And that missing piece, it doesn't come to light until, well, years later when Andre is discussing this whole experience with a mentor. And the mentor's like, let's simulate this interview again. And that's where the first major flaw in Andre's approach is revealed. He's completely ignoring the why behind his code.
So he's like, boom, here's the perfect solution. But like no explanation, doesn't say how he got there, why it works.
Exactly. It's like, imagine you bake a cake, right? You throw on the table and go, ta-da! But you don't explain the ingredients, the process, why you chose that recipe. Sure, it might taste good, but no one's going to learn anything from that.
I can see how that wouldn't really fly in a real job setting. You're not just, coding in a vacuum. You've got to bring other developers along with you. You've got to help them understand your thought process, especially when you're working on large, complex projects.
Right. And that lack of communication, that invisible thought process, it ties directly into the second major flaw that Andre's mentor uncovers. And this is what the difference between competitive coding and professional coding. It really, really hits home. It's all about code quality, or in Andre's case, the lack of it.
Okay, yeah, this is where it gets really interesting for me. Like, I can already picture Andre's code, right? It's this tangled mess of shortcuts, hacks, stuff that only made sense to him in the heat of a competition. Am I far off?
Not far off at all. Andre's code, it worked, but it was like the programming equivalent of a Jenga tower after a few too many rounds.
Okay.
Functional, but one wrong move away from complete chaos. His mentor basically told him straight up, if I were a team lead, I'd have no idea what this code was supposed to do, let alone how to maintain it, add new features, anything.
Ouch. Yeah, that's got to sting a little bit. But honestly, I think a lot of people, especially coming from that competitive coding background, they might wonder, like, if the code works, who cares how pretty it looks?
Sure, it's a common misconception, but in the real world, code quality, it's paramount. And for so many reasons, it's not about aesthetics, right? It's about building software that's robust, it's maintainable, it's scalable. Think of it like this. You wouldn't build a house on a foundation of sand, would you?
No way. Not if I'm planning on, living there for a while.
Exactly. And the same goes for code. Poorly written code, it might get you through a competition, but it's gonna crumble under the weight of real-world demands. Let's break down why this is so important.
Yeah, let's do it. Give us the rundown. Why does code quality matter so much?
Well, first and foremost, think about readability. Other developers, they need to be able to read and understand your code. In a professional setting, you're collaborating often on, massive code bases, thousands, even millions of lines of code. And if your code is this tangled mess of cryptic abbreviations and confusing logic, it's going to create huge bottlenecks, make it really hard for your team to function.
It's like trying to, decipher hieroglyphics instead of just reading, plain English. I can see how that would get old.
Exactly. And speaking of getting old, let's talk about maintainability. Software is constantly evolving, right? You're fixing bugs, adding features, making improvements. If your code is a nightmare to navigate, to understand, even simple changes can feel like you're, performing surgery with a butter knife.
And I imagine that can lead to some pretty hairy situations, especially when you factor in things like deadlines, budgets, all that.
Absolutely. Messy code can make even minor updates a really costly, time-consuming endeavor. And then there's scalability. As your user base grows, the software needs to handle more and more complexity. Clean, well-organized code. That becomes even more crucial. It's the difference between a system that can gracefully handle growth and one that just buckles under pressure.
So we've got readability, maintainability, scalability. Any other reasons why our listeners should, really prioritize writing clean code?
A few more. Collaboration, for one. Imagine you're brought onto a project, it's already underway. Would you rather inherit a well-documented code base, clear logic, meaningful variable names, or one that looks like it was written by, a caffeinated squirrel?
Yeah, I'll take option A, please.
Right. Clean, organized code makes it so much easier for teams to work together effectively. And finally, there's a certain level of professionalism, I think, that comes with writing good code. It reflects your attention to detail, your commitment to quality. It's respect for the craft of software development.
Totally. It's like the difference between, like a rushed, sloppy construction project versus one that's built to last, built with care. One might get the job done in the short term, but the other, that's a testament to the skill and the professionalism of the people who built it.
Exactly. One's going to cause headaches down the road, while the other, that's a solid foundation for the future.
So what does this all mean for our listeners who might be, in Andre's shoes? They've been crushing it in the competitive coding scene, but they're realizing, okay, there's this whole other side to coding, right?
Yeah.
This side that values things like readability, maintainability, all these things we've been talking about. How do you bridge that gap? So how do you go from coding for raw speed to coding for the rest of us? What are some concrete steps, things our listeners can actually do to bridge that gap?
It really boils down to shifting your mindset, going from solve it fastest to solve it sustainably. It's like you're transitioning from a solo sprint to a team marathon.
Okay, I like that analogy.